Hi, it's Christopher, Mono County Library Director and co-host of the Oxygen Starved podcast, and I'm back with Book Talk Friday and two great library books for you to check out. Now, Martha's Vineyard today is often portrayed as a highbrow vacation spot, but in the 19th century, it was home to the largest deaf community in the country, and was so for generations. It's the setting for Show Me a Sign by Anne Claire LeZotte that came out just a couple years ago. This middle grade novel starts in the early 1800s when an 11-year-old Mary's peaceful existence among her deaf community is being shattered by the death of her brother, rising tensions with the native tribe over land disputes, and the arrival of a hearing scientist from the mainland who has come to learn what causes deafness. Now, the scientist's ideas reflect the prevailing understanding of that era that often resulted in more misinformation about deafness and deaf culture, and his involvement with Mary threatens to overturn her world. LeZotte, who is deaf herself, did a ton of research while crafting this great piece of historical fiction, and she doesn't hold back from mixing in the honest reality of prejudice and racism in early small-town America. This honesty underscores something she wants readers to take away from her book, which includes young deaf readers being able to see someone like them in print, which is no small thing even today, and to consider, is the problem that Mary is deaf, or is it really how the larger world views and treats her because of it? This compelling book came out to great reviews, and LeZotte, who works in a library, loves incorporating tidbits that help build out a larger picture of a vibrant deaf culture. My favorite is what she called in an interview an early form of Zoom, deaf people signing to each other through spyglasses. Now, this book leads me to my pick for the newer book this week. Deaf Utopia, a memoir and a love letter to a way of life by Nyle DiMarco. It just came out and is also garnering great reviews and hitting the bestseller lists. Normally, I take memoirs written by anyone under the age of 50 with a huge grain of salt. They better have a very compelling tale to tell. Well, I can tell you this one delivers. DiMarco, who is deaf, first came to my attention during last year's Oscars because one of his production company's works was nominated. Not Coda, which won Best Picture, but Audible, a short documentary he co-produced about a young athlete at Maryland School for the Deaf. It didn't win, but it turns out he also produced a Netflix reality series called Deaf U about 4 students at Gallaudet University, the oldest university for the deaf and hard of hearing in the US. You can hear me talk more about this title at length in the next episode of the Oxygen Starved podcast, but in brief, DiMarco's story isn't so much remarkable as it is illuminating about being deaf. He is 4th generation, so he grew up completely immersed in American Sign Language and deaf culture, supported in no small part by his mother, who is an activist in promoting best practices in deaf education. He and his 2 brothers are close in age, and much of this book is recounting what it was like to grow up a deaf in a hearing world, and true to the subtitle, what makes deaf with a capital D culture so rich and vibrant. Along the way, he doesn't pull punches on the challenges, and he frequently pierces the misconceptions that those of us who are hearing may have. For instance, 2 quick things. First, he was born a year before the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed, so his mother didn't even have the option to have an interpreter with her in the delivery room, where she gave birth to Nyle and his twin brother Nico. The hospital staff assumed she would just lip read, which, sure, any woman who is frazzled from just having been through the process of birthing twins should be able to do no problem, right? Well, when the doctor passed along the grave news that both of her twins were deaf, he was the one who became confused, not understanding why these new parents were smiling and laughing and doing high fives at the news. The other thing? Well, lip reading, even in the best of situations, only communicates about 30% of the words. It's one reason Nyle prefers to have a pad or his iPhone speech-to-text app handy when meeting hearing people for the first time. Now, Nyle and his brothers grew up in a proudly deaf family and culture. Each went on to success because of it. His twin brother, who always loved music, is a DJ today. And Nyle himself went on to win 2 reality shows, including Dancing with the Stars, before turning that fame into a vehicle for showcasing and empowering deaf culture. I learned a lot from this book, in no small part because his passion for this is infectious. He keeps the judgmental bits for hearing people to a minimum, and the result is a book that is an enjoyable read and will likely spark more conversation about deaf culture and will be a great book discussion pick. This is Deaf Utopia by Nyle DiMarco. This is Show Me a Sign by Anne LeZotte. 2 great reads about deaf culture you can find at Mono County Libraries. Come in and grab one of these or another great book to read. In the meantime, stay safe and happy reading.